Today we are going to be talking about striking clocks. And I don't mean for striking that they're quite beautiful, though a lot of them are. I mean that they actually strike. And let me just give you a peek at what that sounds like. That's it getting ready to strike. And okay, now this particular clock is called a parlor clock. There are different styles of clocks, many of whom are also striking. And I'm focusing on the parlor clock today because this is the kind of clock that Manly traded a sled of wood for Laura for Christmas. Today, that same clock is on display in the dining room at Rocky Ridge. Unfortunately, with the lighting, it's hard to get a clear picture, but I do have this one from Barbara Walker that was taken either in the 70s or the 80s. It looks like the paper face of the clock was much more intact then. It'll show you anyway how you wind any kind of clock like this. This parlor clock is a clockwork, which means you have to wind it, and it also uses the pendulum here at the bottom to keep the count. And if you hear, the tick-tock of a clock, that's it. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Now I'm going to stop that, and I want to show you there are two holes, one on either side of the clock face. Now, the vast majority of clocks have it set up so you put the key in and then you turn towards the center of the clock. So we're turning that way, or counterclockwise, ironically. And what we're doing is winding up the spring, and as the spring slowly unwinds, it turns the wheel that keeps the clock hands going the correct way. And you're going to push till you get resistance. Now, exactly how much that is sort of practice. This one actually wants to go a little further than I feel comfortable going, because if you go too far, you can spring the clockwork and then it won't work at all. You'll have to take it to a clock repairman. But you have to turn it far enough so that it actually keeps the day. Now this is supposed to be an 8-day clock. I normally end up having to wind it again on day 4. Or really, I do Sunday and Wednesday usually. Now this clock on the other side, the winding turns again to the center of the clock. You're always turning to the center of the clock. And again, you want to go until you feel true resistance. Like that. So, this side winds the time, this side winds the chimes. Now if you don't wind them both, you can get the chimes off. If you don't want it to chime, you just have to wind this side. And I personally like a chiming clock. My niece and nephew call them our bonging clocks, so they're not as pleased with them as my mom and me are. And some people aren't. When my great-grandfather died, we got a striking clock for the Johnson County Farm Bureau, and they shut it off because, oh horrors, it would strike. So some people like it, some people don't. When you have it wound, you're going to set the clock to the right time. If it is more than a half hour off, you have to pause at each time it would strike. So you'd have to pause right before the 6 and then again right before the 12, or else you'll get the count of striking off. There are different ways striking clocks can strike. My parlor clock just strikes at the top of the hour with the number of hour it is, and then once on the 30-minute mark. Other clocks will do one chime at the 15-minute mark, 2 on the half hour, and 3 on the 45. But our grandfather clock is actually much more complicated in its strike. You can hear it play an actual tune. The tune gets longer as you go through the series, the quarter after, half hour, quarter till. And in this clock's case, it is actually doing Westminster chimes. So it will do part of it on the quarter and half of it on the half hour, 3/4 and the 3/4 mark, and then it'll do it in full before it strikes the number of hours. There is a poem that goes with Westminster chimes that I was taught when I learned to play it on the piano. All through this hour, Lord, be my guide, and by thy power no foot shall slide. And then we're going to start the weight, the pendulum. And when it strikes, this is actually, this ringed thing is the bell, and that little clapper there is what strikes it. And with that, I'm going to close the case. And that's how a striking clock works. Join us again for Trundlebed Tales. And remember to look for us all around the web. And remember to brighten the corner where you are.